Did you ever start something and were not able to finish it? I've done that several times. And the question comes, why? Why should I start on anything and not finish? Today we've got the answer here with us. This is Now Tell Us. I'm your host, Anthony Muirore. And at Now Tell Us, we have guests come and tell us stories. They come and inspire us. They come and educate us on a subject. And always we have great guests. Usually we have one guest come and tell us something. Today we have two guests that come and tell us about a book they've written which answers the question, why can't I finish something? The guests are Tim Vandehey and Tracy Maylett. And I would ask you to come join me as we go and meet them. But before that, please remember to share this episode with all your friends. If you have a question, ask. If you want to make a comment, giving us feedback, we love a feedback. So thank you in advance. Even if you get to watch this as the recorded version, we love your participation and appreciate you. So let's go and find out how we can always finish what we start. Here we go. Hi, team.
Anthony, hi, how are you?
I'm good. How is Tracy? How are you?
Anthony, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to have you here and Now Tell Us today. Welcome
Good
to
to
the
be
show.
here.
Thank you.
Yes. So, can I know where each and every one of you is?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
And Tracy?
And I'm in Springville, Utah.
That's beautiful. We are connected from all corners of the world. I'm on the other side of the world in Europe. And it's good to be connected because we are reaching other people far and wide. And it's good to get to hear the answer to this question. Now, for information to those who are joining us, Tim and Tracy have written a book known as Swipe. And this question is answered. And the science behind why we don't finish what we start. And I won't take much time talking because we have two people who can talk over and over telling us about why we don't finish. Now, Tim, let's get you started and tell us a bit more. And I'll ask questions if I find the reason to ask a question, but otherwise, I just want to hear because this is Now Tell Us. Go ahead.
Well, I'm happy to. So this book started out as a different kind of thing. It was going to be a collaboration between me and Tracy. It was going to be a business book. We'd already written two business books together.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we looked at this idea, the more we realized that, among other things, technology has sort of conditioned us to think that we can change our reality with the flick of a finger.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't like something that we're doing, we can just escape, sort of hit the eject button and move on to something else. Which is not to say that people didn't start things and not finish them before the iPhone came along, because of course they did. But technology has made it easier. And
Mm.
the more we talked about this, we were originally going to be looking at why employees at companies do or do not engage with their work, and more
Mm.
importantly, why they don't. And when the more we looked at this, the more it became clear to us that this was a bigger issue of people all over the world, every age, every culture, starting things and failing to finish them, which leads to unhappiness and regret. So that was where the sort of the genesis of the book.
Mm-hmm. How far back was this?
This was right at the beginning of COVID. It was early 2020.
Okay.
that we sat down to talk about this, and initially had an idea that we liked for a business book. And then again, we took a deeper look at it and realized we had something more on our hands.
That's
There was the big aha moment for me when Tim said, "You realize we're not just talking about business here. This is not just about people that disengage and quit their jobs or show up to work and don't engage." And he said, "This is everywhere." And it really kind of hit me at that point. Yeah, even in my own life, I've had these experiences, and so it became, as Tim mentioned, not a business book, but a general book for all of us. Although it does have a lot of business implications.
Yeah, I have been there myself, having written a book that stayed on the computer for about can I remember just about 20 years that my book was lying on the computer. So I'm a good example of starting something and not finishing. So I'm good that you came up with this. Now, what experiences or what research have you been into to come up with this book? And yeah, go ahead and tell us, please.
Well, first of all, as we mentioned, this started out as a business book. So
Mm-hmm.
it does have a lot of business research behind it. We took 50 million employee survey responses. That's a lot of data. So
Well,
we gathered all of this data, 50 million responses that said, what causes you to quit something that was once important to you? People show up to work and they're excited about their jobs, and then all of a sudden they're not excited. What caused that to happen, and why is it you have the desire not to be a part of this any longer? So
mm,
first of all, it started with all that business research. And Tim is excellent in knowing, gathering information from lots of different sources other than just business as well. And so we took this idea, and I'm an organizational psychologist, so I study the way people behave in groups and organizations. And we said there's a lot of research that doesn't just apply to business; it applies to all of us. And so this book is about that research, but it's taken in terms that we can all understand. It's not just about business. It's not just about psychology. It's about the pieces that are out there, a lot of experiences that are in there. Your experience, I'm Tim, I'm going to put you on the spot because Anthony just said something that I know really resonated with you, and it's actually the first chapter of the book, and the
Mm-hmm.
way the book starts out.
Yep. I mean, about you're talking about books not being writing projects not
It's
being.
exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, that's, yeah, I mean, I've been a freelance writer for, almost 30 years, so I know
mhm,
that was the genesis of the idea for me, was thinking about all the writing projects that not so much I haven't finished. I've got a few, but when you keep a roof over your head by finishing projects, you tend to finish them. But I
mhm,
certainly have many, many, many colleagues, friends, peers who have they used to have file drawers full of old manuscripts. Now, of course, they have hard drives full of old manuscripts and unfinished things.
mhm,
Uh, and it's incredibly common but in every area, from creativity to fitness to home projects to even things like relationships. One of the areas that we dug into, and I think we might dig into deeper, maybe in a future book, I'm not sure, is the term we came up with to describe this was swiping. The reason the book is called Swipe is
mhm,
because the act of it goes back to that act of swiping something with your finger on your smartphone.
mhm,
It's that instinctive, non-thinking panic response of, I'm uncomfortable with this, I'm going to move away from it without thinking about it. And we
mhm,
also, what Tracy and I realized is, we also do that in our relationships when we disengage from moments that are difficult with our child. And I have two teenagers, so when I'm tempted to disengage with them over something that might make me as a father uncomfortable,
yeah,
talking about sex with my 16-year-old, for instance,
mhm,
um, that's also a swipe. That's also a disengagement from something that is important to us, but that in the moment we might, not be, in the moment of discomfort, we might choose to say, no, I can't deal with this right now, and move
mhm,
on to something else. Almost always those are followed by regret. We talk about the idea of unfinished writing projects, I don't know a single writer who has not said, I wish I'd stuck with that. If I'd only stuck with that project, I'd have a finished book. I'd have 5 finished books by now. But in
mhm.
the moment, it's in that moment, we're not thinking, we're just reacting. And that actually ties into some good science that Tracy might be able to. I'm going to put you back on the spot, man, to talk about system 1 and system 2. So
You
that's
got it.
your handoff.
Very good. Well, part of the research of this book is about the neuroscience. So
Okay.
how do our brains really digest information, and what do we do with that information? What's really interesting is there's he's a psychologist, he's a medical doctor as well, Nobel Prize winner, philosopher, just excellent individual, Daniel Kahneman, and he wrote about this concept called System One and System Two. We often think of the brain as different parts of the brain. We think of the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, et cetera. And what he's saying is, okay, that's great, but the way we think is a little bit differently. We have a system. We have two systems.
Hmm.
System one is that system that processes information very quickly. It's a reactionary, reflexive action. So if I touch a stove, system one tells me immediately remove my finger from that stove. If I'm driving back from work, I don't have to think about it because it's automatic. It's an automatic process. It just happens. System two is different. System two is almost lazy. System two says it's a lot of work. I have to stop and think about it and process that information. System one makes most of our decisions, and it's very reactionary. System two has to think about information. But that's where our good decisions come from. So, what the science tells us is that many of the decisions that we make that cause us to swipe are system one decisions. They're very reactionary.
Mm.
So, when we get, as you've come to find out with your book, you get to chapter 2 or you get to chapter 5 or wherever that is, or you get to the point where you say, I don't want to hand this in because maybe people won't like it, or maybe I need to go through a process. System one immediately says, this is too difficult. Stop. Avoid this discomfort. Well, we
Mm.
do this in technology also. We swipe. So, dating apps, or we're reading the news. By the way, it's changed the way we even read the news. We don't read it left to right like we used to. We read
Mm.
it top to bottom. We scroll. And that's because we can move to something of comfort from discomfort. So, the swipe is the intentional move or the unintentional move reaction from moving something from something uncomfortable to something comfortable. The disadvantage of that is we don't take advantage of system two. System two
Mm.
doesn't is the system that allows us to stop and think, why do I want to turn in this novel? Why is this important to me? Why should this relationship matter to me? Why do I want to stay on this job? What are the advantages, even though it may be difficult? So
Mhm.
this book is about how do we move from that reaction to swipe to understanding what's in it for me. Why do I want to complete this? And it is truly based on neuroscience. This book takes the science of the way we think and simplifies that in the way that we can understand and apply it to our own lives.
Mm.
And actually, one of them, Tracy, you touched on something really important, which is, one of the aspects of System Two that we don't talk about very much, but we should. A lot of this is about resources. As Tracy said, System Two is lazy. System Two, using the cognitive powers of our prefrontal cortex, takes a lot of horsepower. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
energy and time
Mm.
and
Mhm.
work, and it's exhausting sometimes. And we don't want to. We're lazy. We don't want to do it. We want to conserve resources.
Yeah.
One of the ways in which System Two makes a huge difference for people who actually want to finish things, because that's what we always come to in these conversations, is how can people actually finish what they start?
Mhm.
One of the most effective ways is to use that ability that we have as human beings, as highly, beings of high levels of cognition, to project into the future and look at what could happen.
Mm.
That takes a lot of mental horsepower, which is why we don't always do it. But we really should if we want to get past those moments where we're tempted to swipe.
Mhm.
Project things into the future and say, okay, what's likely to happen if I don't follow? How am I going to feel tomorrow if I quit this today? Almost always it's regret. We don't, if we can get, that's the importance of getting past System One. If we're able to get to System Two, we can say, how am I going to feel when I walk away from this workout plan that I've been working at so hard for
Mhm.
2 months because I'm frustrated? I'm going to
Mhm.
feel like a failure tomorrow. Or how am I going to feel if I stick with it for another month and I start to see some results? How am I likely to, I'm likely to feel proud, more confident, etc. So if we can being able to tap into that ability to project ourselves into the future and look at the two options, really the fork in the road, and say, well, on one hand, this is what I'm getting for myself in the future. On the other hand, there's this. If I stick with this and work past the discomfort, that's an incredibly powerful tool for finishing what you start.
Hmm. Now I have a question. Now, because and thank you very much for uh, all the hints and ideas that I'm already hearing here, and I guess all the listeners or the viewers are getting. Now, the question is, either of you could have written this book, but you chose to write it, two of you. Has this anything got to making sure that I finish what I start? How is that?
Tim, may I address that one? Because I'll speak
Yeah,
for
yeah,
myself here.
yeah.
This was important to me. So Tim and I have known each other for a long time. We wrote our first book together 10 years ago. I'd rough guess. We started working together. And one of the things I noticed about Tim was Tim thinks differently than I do, even though we have similar values and similar core values. Tim sees things differently than I do.
Mm,
And that's been a wonderful partnership in the way we viewed things. And so one of the things I realized is, first of all, Tim has the writing expertise that I don't have. I may have the psychological expertise and the business expertise. And so that combination of the two really made it a powerful book and working together. And so one of the things I wanted to make sure we did was I wanted to make sure this book was finished. And Tim helps me along to make that happen.
mm,
And I wanted to make sure also that as we did this, that we had a very diverse perspective and different ideas that were in here. I didn't want to write a psychology book. Um, I wanted to make sure that this book was something that all of us could use, and
mm.
business people could use it, and people at home could use it, and anyone could use it. And Tim brought that perspective, and I think that's very important in the way we work together.
Yeah, and from my thank you, Tracy. And from my perspective, Tracy really held me accountable for the writing, because I've been writing books since 2004. Well, really since earlier than that, but a lot full time since 2004.
Mm,
And I have a style that I have built over that time, and occasionally I fall into autopilot on that style. It's
mm,
impossible not to. Um, there were cases in writing this book in early drafts where some of my writing was very repetitive. Is
mhm,
that was very repetitive, and Tracy flagged those areas that we've already said this in two other ways. This we can take this part out, and as a result of him flagging all those areas where I was repeating myself, or repeating our ideas, we really ended up with a more streamlined, cleaner book. So that was one of the areas. There were other areas. Obviously, Tracy has the psychology and background and the business background that I don't have. But that was a big part of this, and enabling this to be a good book was that other set of eyes who had as much right as I did to criticize the content and say, yeah, this is going on too long. This is too much of the same stuff. Let's trim this down, slim it down, and it ends up being a better reading book because of Tracy's input.
And Anthony, I appreciate you asking that question because it's an important part of this book, which is
mm,
there are there are times that it's easy not to just not to do it. It's easier to write your book yourself, possibly
mhm,
not take that critique or opinion from somebody else, because that's hard. It's hard to hear. I heard that from Tim. I heard that from other people. But it's the way you get things done. Sometimes you have to enlist others in doing so, and it's more difficult, but it becomes a better product once you do.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, and this is the reason I asked, because if I had maybe given my book to someone else to have a look at it early in its lifetime, then it would have come out much earlier than just waiting 20 years. This is in any other area of life. Your example could be a good one of giving out my ideas to someone else there who can give me feedback, who can uh, put input ideas to make it come out and get finished as quickly as possible, I guess.
Well, I do think if that's like I said, that's the question we always get back to, right?
Mm,
Is how can people finish what they start based
mm-hmm,
on the ideas that we've come up with and all the insights that we've developed, some of which didn't make it into the book. I mean, this is a huge subject as we've been finding, and we've been finding more and more and more dimensions of it since we released the book.
mm-hmm,
Uh, but one of them is collaboration and accountability.
mm-hmm,
Um, we don't go into that much because so much of this is such a solitary thing. People's partially because there's a lot of shame involved in
mm,
people saying I didn't finish my workout program or my book or whatever. But finding collaborators and having people who have the equal 50-50 right to hold each other accountable, as Tracy and I did working on this book, can be a huge benefit to getting things finished. Assuming the trick is finding the right collaborator. That's Tracy and I have always gotten along really well. We have great chemistry. We're very honest with each other. We've always had really strong ground rules, and I think our collaboration is it's something I absolutely treasure because it's worked out beautifully. And so that's probably the tricky part. I think that's one of the reasons we didn't go into it in the book, because it's a book unto itself, how to collaborate. But if people can find collaborators with whom they can have a healthy, honest relationship, an equal relationship, because that's the issue so often is collaborations end up being Simon Garfunkel, Simon up here and Garfunkel down here in a lot of cases. Those don't work. But if you can find a collaborator who is an equal, that's a tremendous tool for finishing things.
Yeah, and I agree to that because it's not such an easy thing to let people into what I am doing. Just to find the very right person to bring into the business ideas that I have, which I might have started and not have an idea how to complete. I can't find the right person that we are going to work
Yeah.
with.
Yep.
And now the question is, since this did not find its way into this book, and I guess, and I want to believe that it's going to be a book coming to help us find
Uh-huh.
ways to bring in people into our business or whatever it is that we are doing to make it successful. Now, that did not find its way into the book. And here you highlight the issue, the problem that we are all facing. I guess there could have been some things that found inside the book, their way inside the book, that can help us deal with this issue. Which are they?
Tracy, you want me to take that, or you want to go ahead?
Yeah, why don't you take the first shot, because you've got some good stuff there, and I'll add to
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So what we found was there are two big roadblocks that can turn into assets if people approach them the right way.
Mm-hmm.
The two big areas that tend to sabotage, I should say, people's ability to finish what they start are expectations and motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's cover expectations first.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe Tracy can talk about motivation. So expectations really is about erroneous expectations. People tend to set up expectations before they start something. And even when it's something that they've done repeatedly, that's one of the issues we find is it's not just people start something and don't finish it once. They go back and they try again and again and again and again without changing their base level expectations and motivations. That's
Mm-hmm.
a problem. Expectations tend to come in two flavors. There tend to be expectations about what the experience will be like, and expectations about what the results will be.
Mm-hmm.
So the analogy I like to draw is, suppose that you were starting a workout program. You're trying to get in shape, lose weight, get fit. If you go into something like that with the expectation that, hey, I'm going to be smiling like the people in the workout videos,
Mm-hmm.
and after a month, I'm going to be ripped. You're going to be disappointed and disillusioned, because the reality of working out really hard is it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be on the floor in a pool of sweat, most likely, and it's going to take time. And you also have to change your diet, but it's going to take time. You're not going to look in the mirror after a month and look like The Rock. That's not going to happen. So if you have those erroneous expectations, you're going to be disappointed, disillusioned, and you're probably going to swipe. You're going to say, why am I bothering with this? This is a waste of my time. Whereas if you have realistic expectations on how hard something will be and what it's going to take to get the results you want, then you can roll with those punches and say, okay, I've been at this for a month, but I know what to expect after a month. I know what to expect after 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
I know how hard it's going to be to write a book, because I understand, before going into it, that I'm going to hit a point where I'm just going, I have no more ideas. My ideas are gone. My brain is numb. So having correct expectations that are in line with reality is one of the keys to doing this. The other one relates to motivation, which I think Tracy can talk about a little bit.
Love to. So the current me is very good at making promises for the future me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very good at saying I want to work out, and I'm So this morning, as an example, I decided that I wanted to do a 10K every morning before I got to work. So I was very excited about that until this morning at 5 o'clock when my alarm went off. I was no longer excited or motivated to make that happen. So I'm really good at making promises for the future me. That could
Mm,
be, I'm going to write this novel. I'm going to enter this relationship. I'm going to, whatever that may be. We're really good at that. But the current me is not good at fulfilling yesterday me's promises. One of the things that we learned about motivation can be easily remembered through an acronym. And that acronym is MAGIC.
mhm,
So we tend to be motivated and engaged. So when I talk about motivation, I'm talking about engaged, giving our hearts, our spirits, our minds, our hands to what we're doing. We tend to be motivated when 5 keys are in place. Easy to remember by the acronym MAGIC. So
mm,
the M stands for meaning. When what I'm doing actually has a purpose. There's meaning behind what I'm trying to get done. Why is it I'm doing this? Why am I in this relationship?
mhm,
Why do I need to work out? Well, I need to get in better physical condition for my grandchildren. There's meaning behind it. The second piece is I tend to be engaged and motivated when there's autonomy in place. Autonomy is the ability to shape things in the way that I can do best. It's not complete chaos. So, autonomy at work may be I have freedom to work on the tasks that I need to work on
mhm,
in a way that I can do it best. The next one is G for growth. The opposite of growth is stagnation. Growth is I'm getting better every day, and I can see that happening. I can tell that I'm improving,
mm,
which deals with the next one also, and that's impact. If I continue to run my 5K every morning or walk or bike my 20K or whatever I decide to do, and I'm not seeing any results from my effort, I'll stop that. I will no longer be engaged or motivated. Finally, the last one is connection. The connection is a sense of belonging to something.
mm,
I will engage when I feel like I'm surrounded by other people who can engage as well, or I'm connected to the reason why we're doing this or the task. When those 5 factors, meaning, autonomy, growth, impact, and connection, are in place, we tend to be motivated in the environment in which we're working.
mm. That's good. And I think it's the connection. At some point, Tim mentioned that you tend to finish what you started if you have to put a roof over your head,
Mhm. Yeah.
which is good. This is a connection. Or do we call it, and where could it find itself in the 5 words?
I,
Well, you could easily change the C in that context to consequences.
Okay. Well, that
Um,
would be good.
that's
Consequences.
I
If I
mean,
don't. Mhm,
Tracy's magic is dead on right. If you wanted to add that piece to it, consequences or accountability would
mm,
come into play. I mean, what yeah, you're gonna do the things you need to do if the consequences are more steep or more dire. I mean, if
yeah.
there's a reason that a lot of people who really they get in shape for the first time after a health crisis because suddenly the consequences of being out of shape and eating garbage for years are suddenly very, very real.
mm,
If you have to finish a script or a screenplay or something, or you're not going to be able to make rent and your family is going to be living on the street, you're going to finish that screenplay or that project.
yeah, get finished.
Um, if it's a choice between going to therapy, going to couples therapy, and getting a divorce, you're probably going to go to couples therapy. So there is definitely a certain number, and a lot of people avoid putting themselves in the path of consequences when it
Mhm,
comes to finishing what they start. I think that's the absolutely wrong way to go. Put yourself in the path of consequences. Consequences keep us honest. Now they shouldn't necessarily
Consequence.
be existential.
mm,
I don't really
Yeah.
want to risk my family being homeless because I can't finish a book.
mm.
But something a little bit lower down the severity scale, not the worst idea in the world.
Consequences are what make us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Mm,
And we tend to swipe out of discomfort. So I'm really glad Tim mentioned that the consequences idea. When we run that one through the magic elements here, meaning there's a reason why I'm doing this. It's because I want to put a roof over the head of the children.
mhm,
The impact factor. Impact is where consequences come in also, and that is what will be the result if we call it play it through to the end. If I run this through all the way to the most likely end result, what will be the consequences of this? Well, the consequences of me not getting up this morning probably are kind of minimal, but if I continue to do that, then the consequences are going to be the impact that I see will not take place. I'll die of a heart attack. So there's a lot that's there.
True, true. Now, let's come to a real life scenario, just about where we started. We can end there because we are almost coming to the end of this show. Now, I finally published my book after 20 years and another one. But then I have like, yeah, 20 titles that I have come up with that haven't been begun, and I am not sure when they're going to finish. What would you advise someone who's got great ideas, a lot of ideas, and can't just even get started in order for him to finish? So how do we go about that?
Oh, Tim, you've got to take this
I
one.
got
This
this
is
one.
this is your
Well,
baby.
I've got this. So there's an old phrase that mostly applies to fiction writers, but really applies to all writers, which is "kill your darlings." That for fiction writers, it really means kill off characters in your fiction that either don't work or who need to die to carry on the story properly.
Mm,
Uh, I would advise the same thing, which is take the ideas that aren't, you know, people hold on to ideas because it's same for the same reason they hold on to junk in drawers. They think one day they'll get back to them, and 90% of the time that is an illusion. So I'd say pick the 2 or 3 ideas that are the ones that are closest to your heart and just get rid of the rest. Just
mm,
don't, because accept the reality that you're probably not going. Number one, you're not going to get back to. You're not going to write those books, very
yeah.
likely. Number
Uh,
two, the act of writing the ones that are where the ideas are, they're really in here. They're the ones you care about the most. Is going to spark new ideas that will lead to other books, just like Swipe did for us. I
mm,
mean, we've come up, Tracy and I have come up with a handful of other ideas just since this book came out that we had never even thought about prior to writing it.
oh yeah.
So that's my is clear out the garbage. Like I said, kill your darlings. You keep if you're holding on to some ideas because you're afraid to let them go, let them go. That's number one, I think,
Yeah,
for me.
thank you for that. Yes,
You know,
and
part of finishing is the deciding what's not going to get finished.
Yeah.
So that takes a system to thinking. You have to actually stop and think about it.
Yep.
mm, what's not gonna finish? Yeah, and definitely this program, this episode was started with the idea of finishing it at some point, and I'm glad that we've had some good collaboration between Tim and Tracy, talking about the book Swipe. For those who may have just come in as we are going on, Swipe, the science behind why we don't finish what we start. Now, where can someone get this book or more ideas, or even get to contact you to collaborate on an idea they've had and they are sure that it's going to get finished?
Few different ways of doing that. First of all, the book's available at most retail outlets. Certainly, in the United States, it's available at any brick and mortar store, but it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, where most books are sold. And this has been a bestseller in many different categories, so we're very excited about that. The second piece is we do have a website, and that website is currently being revised, but you can get on that website right now for additional resources, which you see down there, which is swipethebook.com, swipethebook.com. That has some contact information for us, as well as some information on how to order the book. And there'll be additional resources over the next month that you'll see on there, including how to assess your own motivation and your own desires to swipe and finish what you start. So please take a look at that. We'd love to have you see it. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you very much. So, everyone, you can rush onto the website and get to know more about swiping. Please don't swipe. Once you're there, don't swipe. Read carefully. Get the book, swipe, and yeah, complete what you start. At this point, I want to thank you very much, Tim and Tracy, for coming to Now Tell Us.
Anthony, it was a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, but before you go, as always, at Now Tell Us, we like people, our guests, leaving us with a few words that we should always remember. So each of you now, because we are blessed to have two of you, we're gonna leave with some two great ideas coming from Tim and Tracy.
I'll start and let the expert finish here. So one of the reasons why we wrote this book is because what the swipe results in is regret. The outcome of not finishing what we start is that regret. It also doesn't give us the opportunity to grow and become what we can be. And when we look at the reasons why the swipe is so damaging, it's because those relationships, those projects, those goals, our jobs that remain unfinished or unsettled are the things that we look back on our lives and say, I wish, if only. And then that's what this book's really written for. It's really to resolve that, to be able to finish what we start so that we can feel better about things and build those relationships and finish what we start and get into shape and do those things that we need to do.
Thank you.
For me, it would be, we have a concept that we came up with in the book that reflects those times when walking away from a situation or a project or anything else is an appropriate response, and that we call that tapping out. So swiping is a reflex that's usually followed by regret. It's running away from something that is beneficial to us. Tapping out is typically consciously choosing to exit a circumstance that is not good for us. The example I like to use was the gymnast Simone Biles, who was just in the news a couple of years ago, walking away from an Olympic gold medal because she was having problems with sensing her position in space when she was going through her gymnastic routines, and she chose to put her own physical and mental health first and to walk away from the competition. That's an affirmative action that is might not be thought of as positive by other people, but that's not their problem. But if it's beneficial for the person who does it because they do it consciously for the right reasons, that's tapping out. Very different from swiping.
Tapping out. That's a good one. And that's a good finish to our episode at Now Tell Us, talking about swipe, why we can't finish what we begin. So once again, we really thank you, Tim and Tracy, for being with us here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, this has been Now Tell Us. I've been your host, Anthony Morode, and together with our guests today, Tim Vandehey and Tracy Maylett, we are saying, please finish what you start. Just do it. Just do it. But first, go to swipethebook.com and find out more. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks.